Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, here for the Daily Blob, where I shake my brain nipples every day in order to get some of that dirty YouTube money so I can afford to provide you folks in-person, hands-on technology education that empowers you to do whatever the hell it is you want to do in Durham, North Carolina. We have a class coming up on AI and web scraping. We have a class coming up on extending AI capabilities with REST API calls. If you're interested in those classes, go to silicondojo.com to see what the schedule currently is. If you want to help support the project, again, free to the end user is not actually free. There's a donor box link down below. And I do have to say, for all those people out there that are like, Eli, stop shaking those brain nipples. What we really want is technology education. You can just go do something very inappropriate. If I said the words, I get canceled on YouTube, and that would not be very good. But just go do something inappropriate to yourself. I do have to say, right now, we have the most views on this channel that we've gotten since literally March of 2016. That is right, the channel is growing. Why? I don't know. But it's true. So anyways, people like to see the brain nipples. That is the reality. So I think this is an interesting story today, coming from the Wall Street Journal and this particular journalist talking about Microsoft not exactly being transparent with their financial disclosures when it comes to OpenAI. So this has actually kind of come up in another video that I'm going to be doing, probably right after this one, talking about how financial disclosures are getting a little more opaque in this whole AI goat screw that we have going on, right? So basically we have this AI fraud going on, right? All of the big tech companies are complicit in this AI fraud. They're all greasing each other's hands to make sure they all make a lot of money while they destroy the foundations of our society. The problem is it's just the numbers just don't goddamn make sense, right? I've talked about this before. LLMs are great. All of these models are great. AI, it's not AI, but the technology stack itself is great. It is groundbreaking. It is paradigm shifting. It's the whole 9 yards. It's just not worth this much, right? Sam Altman is wanting to spend $1.4 trillion simply in CapEx expenses over the next couple of years. Literally wants to boost that up to $4 trillion in CapEx expenses just for one company. That doesn't include Anthropic. That doesn't include xAI. That doesn't include Mistral. It doesn't include, Microsoft and Google and all those other companies. He believes that he should be able to spend $4 trillion simply basically in data centers in the next number of years. And as I've said before, that just doesn't make sense, right? Even a valuable technology, even a valuable product, even a paradigm shifting technology and product simply probably is not worth that amount of money. But, right, that's what they're trying to sell to people. So OpenAI currently has a $500 billion valuation. Anthropic has a $200 billion valuation. xAI apparently has a $200 billion valuation. These valuations are just going through the fucking roof. And the more people look at it, the more it just doesn't, it just fundamentally doesn't make sense, right? Basically, they're using the worst architecture designs in order to deploy these services. They're deploying services that people use, but they're not willing to pay money for. Even the services that people are willing to pay money for, it costs more money than it takes to provide the services, right? OpenAI, I talked about this. $200 a month subscription to OpenAI, and they still lose money, right? If you tell me you lose money on the free accounts, sure, fine, of course. If you say you lose money on the $20 a month accounts, it's like, you got to figure that out. Maybe with scaling and the rest of it, maybe that improves, but you still need to figure that out. When you say you're losing money on $200 a month accounts, that's not a business, boys and girls. That's not a business. That's a cash bonfire. And so the problem that's going on right now is basically all of this AI disaster is built on just stupidity, and more people are seeing it. More and more people are just seeing the abject stupidity. So the issue that's coming up is that these big tech players have to start obfuscating, right? Obfuscating is where you put things on the table, but you make it so confusing to understand, nobody really understands what's going on, right? So they are now going to obfuscating information to try to pretend this isn't a complete and utter disaster. So this, from a journalist, Wall Street Journal, Microsoft is still not meeting its financial disclosure requirements. So because Microsoft is a publicly traded company per the SEC, they have financial disclosure requirements, and apparently, as far as OpenAI is concerned, they are not meeting those requirements. It appears that the SEC might be taking a blind eye to this. Why? Because this is good for the Trump administration. Remember, this whole AI boom has boosted GDP growth in the United States by somewhere between 1 to 1.5%. If we did not have this AI boom, GDP growth would be at nothing. So therefore, Trump really wants GDP growth. This is the only fucking thing growing our GDP. So is it a surprise that the SEC might look the other way at some things that might not be exactly kosher? And the problem we get to is when the government does this, right? When the government does this kind of thing, when the companies do this type of thing, basically it just pushes the disaster a little bit further down the road, and then it makes the disaster even bigger. The Wall Street Journal reports that Microsoft still isn't meeting its financial disclosure requirements regarding its investments and costs associated with OpenAI. A former financial analyst at a Wall Street Journal reporter, Jonathan Weil, writes this morning that Microsoft is required to report, quote, related party transactions when they are material to its earnings. It's the second time he raised the issue in the past month, the first coming just ahead of Microsoft's most recent quarterly earnings announcement. As part of that announcement, Microsoft vaguely disclosed that it lost $4.7 billion because of the money-losing OpenAI investment and related cost. But it did so only via the other line item in its 10-Q filing with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, and not in the quarterly financial statements, press release, earnings call slides, outlook statement, or other material it provides to the press and financial analysts. And when asked about this incredible and unexpected loss by an analyst on the post-earnings call, Microsoft CFO Amy Hood shut down the conversation quickly. So basically, they have a loss from OpenAI. They're putting $4.7 billion loss. They're putting it into the other section and then just trying to paper over it. This is one of the interesting things that happens with these SEC disclosures. And it kind of shows you, what products or services companies are proud of and what ones they want to hide. Right? So basically, right, when they do the disclosures, many times they have the option, right? They have to give numbers. They have to give profit loss numbers. But how they categorize those profit loss numbers can be very telling, right? So when a product is doing very good for a company, they will break that out into its own line. Right? This product or this service has had 300x sales growth over the past year. You want to make sure people know that product is doing really well. Well, you have another product or another few products that aren't doing so well. Well, then you put that into a particular line item. Oh, that's the IoT device line item. All IoT devices go under that line item, and so maybe it broke even, maybe it made a little money, maybe it lost some money, but you don't really know which individual products in that line item did really well and did really poorly. You might have a few items that actually did really well, and then an item that you thought was going to do well tanked, and so those other items bring everything kind of up for that particular line item. So it's interesting here that Microsoft is vaguely disclosing a loss of $4.7 billion, but they're putting that into the other. We don't want to think about it. When we think about artificial intelligence, we only want to think line go up. When line go down, we're just, well, that can't be AI. Eli, don't you understand the definition of AI? AI is line go up. If line go down, obviously it's not AI. Like, what? God damn it. Quote, how long can Microsoft expect investors to tolerate big losses from OpenAI without getting antsy? Wheel asks, quote, it's hard to say when Microsoft won't even provide a clear number for the size of the losses. As Wheel notes, that $4.7 billion other net loss could have been more or less than the figure Microsoft reported, as a software giant isn't transparent about what exactly it is. Quote, the expense line combined a hodgepodge of items, positive and negative, he said. Again, as I've talked about with throwing everything into one line item. All we know is that the figure, quote, primarily reflects net recognized losses on equity method investments, including OpenAI. Microsoft also disclosed that its year ago loss from OpenAI was $1.3 billion, a figure it did not disclose at the time at all. It does not disclose the carrying amount of its OpenAI investment or its fair market value. That's kind of interesting. It hasn't disclosed how its reciprocal revenue sharing agreements with OpenAI impacts its financial results, and it never said what percentage of OpenAI that it really owns until its recent earnings report, when we finally learned that the software giant owns 27% of the company. Quote, how Microsoft has managed to avoid disclosing such basic details is baffling, Wheel writes. Quote, the company in its financial reports identifies OpenAI as an equity method investment, which means OpenAI by definition is a related party to Microsoft under the accounting rules. Microsoft, however, doesn't identify OpenAI in its financial reports as a related party and doesn't say anything about its transactions with OpenAI in its related party disclosures. So the idea is when these companies work incredibly closely together, that they need to be disclosed with related parties, and basically that's not happening with OpenAI. Microsoft has an equity method investment in OpenAI, which kicks in when a company owns 20 to 50% of another company. So they own 27% of OpenAI, giving it the ability to, quote, significantly influence OpenAI. And we've seen examples of that, such as when Microsoft prevented OpenAI from acquiring AI coding startup Windsurf with its recent $500 billion valuation. And that investment is material, with a fair market value of its stake in the company worth over $100 billion. So think about this. Again, like you hear Microsoft, okay, there's OpenAI, their valuation is $500 billion, and Microsoft owns 27% of that. What does that actually mean? It means $100 billion. Microsoft theoretically has $100 billion wrapped up in OpenAI, and yet the paperwork, the disclosures of what's going on with that, not so transparent. Microsoft's total earnings in fiscal year 2025 were $102 billion. So literally, the value of their equity in OpenAI is worth almost an entire year of earnings. That's what we start talking about where this is actually material. This isn't like they own $1 billion in OpenAI or something like that. It's material. Given all this, a significant portion of Microsoft's current valuation of almost $4 trillion is based onto its OpenAI investment. That carries great potential gains, but also great potential losses. And under the generally accepted accounting principles required by the SEC, to which Microsoft must comply, the firm is required to, quote, disclose enough information about related party transactions so that an outside reader can gain an understanding of the effects of the transactions on the financial statements. Microsoft has never done that. Microsoft's $4.1 billion in OpenAI losses are roughly equivalent to 12% of its pre-tax profits. So again, we start actually thinking about what these numbers really mean. Basically over 10%. So they lost over 10% of profits because of OpenAI losses. And this is the first time the company ever disclosed such a thing. Microsoft also disclosed that OpenAI, which doesn't have $250 billion or a stated plan to get that sum, has promised to pay it $250 billion for cloud computing services. And this is one of the weird things with the accounting stuff. And this is again, right? You hear OpenAI, right? NVIDIA provides OpenAI $100 billion in order for OpenAI to buy $100 billion of NVIDIA equipment. OpenAI goes out, they're contracting for, I think it's like $350 billion in Oracle services, even though nobody has a fucking clue how they're going to get $350 billion. The interesting thing with accounting is basically when does that get added into your system as a profit loss? Does it get added when the the agreement takes place, or what does it happen when you actually take the cash in? When you initially set up your QuickBooks, it is interesting for tax purposes. It'll ask you for your accounting practices, basically, when do you recognize the sale? Do you recognize the sale with the handshake, or do you recognize the sale when the cash, when the check actually clears? When I create a business, I always make sure I recognize the sale when the check actually clears, so you don't have to clean shit up at the end of the year. But that's an interesting thing to be think about. Again, with all this OpenAI or this AI horse crap going around, how much of the AI boom is literally smoke and mirrors with accounting and has very, very little to do with neural networks and the rest of it. Right? So think about this. Microsoft also disclosed OpenAI, which doesn't have $250 billion, has promised to pay it $250 billion for cloud computing services. When does that $250 billion sale get recognized? Quote, Microsoft's financial statements comply fully with generally accepted accounting principles and are audited by an independent firm, Microsoft Chief Communication Officer Frank Shaw told the publication. This is one of the interesting things too. Do remember with rules and regulations is basically just trying to keep these companies on the road. They can swerve all over the fucking road. They can turn around and go backwards on the road. They can just stop and smoke a joint on the road. Like literally, like the government, like the rules and the regulations, all they're trying to do is keep the fucking car on the road. If the car is not in the ditch, fine. The thing is, as I just said, you can do a lot of weird things with cars on roads, so long as they're still on the road. So you can go by GAAP. It's called GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. You can go by GAAP, but the idea is that you're supposed to be trying to be legitimate with it. You're supposed to be trying to be transparent, but they give you enough leeway so they don't hamstring you too much. And so that's what becomes interesting, is what happens when these companies they use the rules, they do the policies, but they do it in such a way to obfuscate what the hell is going on. That may be part of the problem. Among my accusations, this guy's accusations, I believe that Wall Street is complicit in Microsoft's financial deceptions, and that the SEC is not regulating companies like Microsoft that disclose fewer and fewer details with each passing quarter. Quote, Microsoft hasn't come close to explaining the full effects of its OpenAI dealings on its own financial statements. Wheel concludes, this isn't supposed to be optional. So as we're going to start hearing more and more about with this whole AI disaster, this is going to get more and more into the business realm, into the accounting realm, into the legal realm. This is one of the things I've talked about for many years. A lot of people say, Eli, how do I become successful in technology? And look, back in 2012, I said, go out and get your MCSE. MCSE was a great way to go back in 2012. One of the things I've talked about for about 10 years now is really, you might want to think about your Juris Doctor or your MBA. I'm telling you, in the modern world, good or bad, that's for somebody else to decide. There is far more innovation in the technology world going on in the financial and the legal realm than there is in the actual tech stacks. The tech stacks are doing what they're doing. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in the tech stacks, but when you're really looking for where you can pull money out as an individual employee and as an individual person, I would argue is that business legal track. That is where you're gonna actually get the real cash. And that's what we're starting to see more and more out of these companies, is they're focusing more on financial and legal innovation and less on the actual technology stack to get them to where they're going. The problem that you're going to run into with this is, don't get me wrong, again, money people, I know money people, God bless money people. Hey, money people, I love you. Anyways, I'm not anti-money people. I'm not anti-money people. I'm not anti-lawyers. The problem is with anything, you take the shit too fucking far, right? Eating a bacon double cheeseburger is fucking awesome. Eating them 4 meals a day for your life is going to give you a heart attack at 40, right? It's not that the bacon double cheeseburger is a bad thing. It's how you consume the bacon double cheeseburger. Again, with the GAAP rules, obfuscating some things. Again, understand for CEOs, obfuscating reality sometimes can be a valuable thing, right? Investors can get spooked over stupid shit. Like truly, over stupid shit, they can get scared and dump all their stuff. So sometimes you do have to shine the turd a little bit. And look, I'm not going to be snarky or mean about that. That's just reality. The problem is when you do it too much, right? Basically, it's the whole thing of like if you take a little bit of money out of the till. I'm not telling you to do this, right? If you're an employee and you need to take a payment or something, or you need to pay for an unexpected cab ride, and you take a little bit money out of your boss's till in order to pay for that thing. Now that's bad. Like you should not do it. But look, you get the money back later. You put it back into the till. But here's the problem: you take a little bit of money out of the till to pay for this. Oh, fuck, something else comes up. So you take a little bit more money out of the till to pay for that. Then you take a little bit more money out of the pill to pay for that. And then holy shit, oh, now all of a sudden you really owe your boss, like you've stolen quite a bit of money from your boss and you have no way to pay that back. So wait a minute, maybe if I take this wad of cash from the boss and I invest it into an AI stock, maybe the gains that I get back will allow me to pay my entire boss back. And that's the thing, right? How does it start? Your car broke down one day. You need to pick your kid up from school. You're like, look, I'm just going to take $10 out of the till. I'll pay it back tomorrow. Should you do it? No. Honestly, is anybody really going to give a fuck even if they find out? Also, no, you're going to get a smack on the finger. But it's $10 and then it's $20 and then fuck, maybe if I just take this $1,000 and that's what leads you into the disaster. And I think that's what we're starting to see with this whole AI fraud. It is an AI fucking fraud. It's 100% legal. All of these syphilitic Silicon Valley jackasses are committing a massive fraud on a global scale in order to extract the value of the foundations of our society to give them a couple of extra dollars. This doesn't make sense. LLMs can be paradigm shifting at the exact same time. They're not worth $4 trillion fucking dollars. So anyways, so what do you think about this? What do you think about Microsoft obfuscating its financial disclosures? What do you think about that on its own? That's on its own, is what it is. And then what do you think about that with everything going on in the macro environment currently? I don't know. Put your thoughts down below. If you like these videos, give us a thumbs up. If you hate these videos, give us a thumbs down. Call me amazing, call me a dumbass, just be a real Lutnick and put that strong American comment down below. Do remember I do these videos because what I actually care about is Silicon Dojo, silicondojo.com, free to end user hands-on technology education that empowers you to do whatever the hell it is you want to do in Durham, North Carolina. We have a class coming up on AI and web scraping next week. We have a class coming up on extending AI capabilities with REST APIs in a couple of weeks. We have more and more classes coming down the pike. So if you're able to come to Durham to actually take the classes, do make sure to go to silicondojo.com to see what our schedule is. Do remember, free to the end user is not free. That's why I shake the brain nips every day. If you want to throw some money into the donor box link down below, that would be ever so lovely. And with that, see y'all later.